Victims of family violence and court proceedings.
I call the member for Moreton.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to victims of family violence and court proceedings in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. I'm pleased to move the motion circulated in my name calling on the Turnbull-Joyce government to act to protect victims of family violence from being directly cross-examined by their abusers during court proceedings. Imagine for a moment, Deputy Speaker, that you are the victim of an assault. Imagine that your fear of the person who assaulted you is so powerful that you feel physically ill when you're in their presence. Now imagine that in order to protect your children, you'll have to face direct questioning from the person you are most terrified of, sometimes about the most intimate aspects of your life. This is the situation for hundreds of parents every year going through our already stressed family courts. Who could blame these parents if the prospect of facing their abuser is so terrifying that they walk away from getting the justice that they and their children deserve? Women Legal Services Australia is a peak body of a network of community legal centres specialising in women's legal issues. There are 15 members stretching the width and breadth of Australia. Women's Legal Service Queensland is located in Moreton, and I know the great work they do every day for women all over Queensland, and acknowledge Angela Lynch and her colleagues from this service. Women's Legal Services Australia are champions for many women's legal issues. For some time they've been calling for changes to the Family Law Act to protect women from being directly cross-examined by their abuser. During the election campaign, Women's Legal Services Australia, along with more than 90 other organisations working with victims of family violence, sent an open letter to all political leaders calling on them to put safety first in family law. One of the 5 steps in the Safety First in Family Law plan is to reduce trauma and support those who are most at risk of future violence and death. I'm proud that Labor took to the election a commitment to amend the Family Law Act to protect victims of family violence from being directly cross-examined by their abuser. The work of family violence organisations like Women's Legal Service tells us that victims of family violence often feel that their former partners use the court system to continue the abuse. Victims can be re-traumatised from the experience of direct cross-examination by their abuser. The evidence given to the court through direct cross-examination can be compromised, affecting the ability of the court to make safe and effective orders. Some victims feel pressured into agreements that may be unsafe or unworkable in order to avoid being directly cross-examined. This is a very serious issue. In a submission to the Law Council of Australia in October 2015, the Women's Legal Service Australia detailed feedback from a survey they'd conducted. The survey asked women what their experience was of being personally cross-examined by their abusers in the family law courts. 3 women were so traumatised they were suicidal. 3 women were physically ill before the court appearance and during the process of cross-examination. 1 woman was violently ill on the side of the road on the way to the court, causing her to be late and the court date vacated. 1 woman had to be medicated just to physically make it into the courtroom and was later admitted to a psychiatric hospital. The words used by the respondents to the survey to describe their experience included fear, anxiety, debilitating, worst nightmare, humiliating, degrading, horrific, horrendous, intimidating, belittled and unjust. Unlike the many problems the Turnbull-Joyce government face, this is a problem with a solution. Labor took to the election a policy to amend the Family Law Act to provide protection for victims of family violence facing direct cross-examination by their abuser, including providing legal representation for both unrepresented parties where that is necessary. This election commitment was costed at $43.2 million over 4 years. That is just over 1/4 of the cost of the government's divisive marriage equality plebiscite of $160 million. The Turnbull-Joyce government should act immediately. Victims of family violence and their children are suffering every single day that this government does not act, unfortunately. I don't pretend for a second that implementing this policy would solve all of the complicated problems around family violence. There's still much more to do. It is always messy when love turns to hate or even worse. Family violence is a difficult policy area, not only because it is emotive, but because it also crosses over jurisdictions. The resultant disjointed system sometimes leaves victims falling between the cracks. Under Mark Dreyfus's guidance, the Shadow Attorney-General, Labor took to the election a range of policies that would assist in addressing this scourge of family violence. So I would welcome the Turnbull-Joyce government implementing these Labor policies, and I'm sure that the victims of family violence don't care who fixes the system, they just want to make sure that it is fixed. And I commend again the great work of Women's Legal Services Queensland in my electorate, but throughout Australia, and the great work they do in saving people's lives.
Is there a seconder?